Alright, welcome back everybody to Pikmin 2. We are up to, or rather we're still on the Awakening Woods. We're going to continue along, collecting more to Pikmins, exploring more caves, hopefully beating this fucking area here soon. At currently 40% of the total debt collected. Today's topic I'd like to discuss is one that is neither new nor is something that I've yet run across in literature or sort of. So, bear with me, and I understand where this is going, and I understand how stupid this is going to sound. But there's a common phrase that everyone is the hero of their own story, which is usually used to justify a villain and his motivations or her motivations to do evil onto other characters, whether that be your main character or some side characters that the hero feels that he or she needs to stand up against, whether they are affected directly or indirectly by the antagonist. But recently this thought came in my head, and again I apologize, because this is something that like a 5-year-old, well, maybe not a 5-year-old, but this is something that they talk about in psychology, where you start to realize that you are not the only person in this universe. Hopefully you learn that you're not the only living being, you're not necessarily the main character of this world. You are one of many people that live in this world and contribute to society, if for no other reason because it gives you a paycheck. But ultimately, if I want a banana and I want to have a banana tree and I can't grow bananas in this climate that I live in, I'm reliant on the people who grow the bananas, who harvest the bananas, who then ship the bananas, who then send it to the grocery store that I then buy those bananas from in order to get the banana. Now, all of those people are, of course, important, it's sort of in a macro level, but in a micro level, they're equally important. But if you're the banana man, cutting down, watching the bananas grow, and then climbing up the tree to cut the bananas down, putting them in boxes, your life can seem very dull and boring and stupid because all you do is cut bananas down, or in my case, all I do is make purchases and then balance them against the budget. And there's more complexity to that, but I won't bore you with the day-to-day things that I do at my job. However, I was thinking about this one night, and this is sort of, we'll say, is a rationalization for what I will consider a bit of an injustice. And I'll tell you what brought this upon me. Recently, the Pope Francis has passed. It's already been more than a week at the time of this recording. He's been buried, let alone, it's been 2 weeks since he's passed, like officially passed away. And, you know, one of the things he talked about, if he could have any superpower or he could perform any miracle, it would be to be able to heal all children in this world. And he never really understood, or at least according to the way this story is laid out, he never really understood why children suffer, why they get sick and die before even reaching adulthood. But for no other reason because they have bad genes, or, you know, they were born differently, they were carried differently, things didn't turn out normal in their body, and ultimately they are born well enough, but, you know, we're raising money. Well, one of my coworkers is raising money, raffle ticket wise, in order to pay for a kid's second heart transplant. The kid's only, what, like 4 or 5 years old, and it's it's a tragedy that he's already had one, let alone there's going to be a second open heart surgery to replace his heart. And it's not an easy thing, you know, to ponder as a spectator. It's hard for me to ponder this, how hard this must be for parents, particularly the child, of course, the one going through it. You could definitely say it's very difficult on them as well, but you know, you spend all that time as a mother, or even maybe as a father to a lesser degree, carrying the child and caring for the child, and you're hoping against all hope, against what I can only assume is an inevitability that eventually your life is going to be cut short. Whether that means you get another 5 years or 10 years or hell, 20 years, I guess you could largely consider a success. And I don't know enough about the medical profession. I don't know what the success rate is. And I don't know how many years, quote unquote years, you can get out of a heart that isn't your own. And unfortunately, I'm fighting against my own thoughts here because, in a way, some of the things that I'm going to suggest, I might suggest at a later time, is unnatural in a different context, in a different point of view. You might look at the same thing that I'm about to say as a good and look at it as a negative if used in the wrong context. But say you were able to take the child's cells and rebuild his heart from scratch. His heart, hopefully your body wouldn't have an inverse impact to it. That's yet to be seen at this point, but imagine you could take his cells, his stem cells, or whatever base level cells you have, and to rebuild him a heart from his own cells. A little bit of science fiction, a little bit of science fact in this regard, because we know that stem cells have the ability to become anything, but it's a bit of an ethical question, because stem cells come from primarily fetuses or what have you, or they, in a lesser degree, come from things that are attached to the baby, like an umbilical cord. You can get stem cells from other things as well, from what I understand. But this is where we're going to diverge into my actual topic. And I don't take pride in saying this because, as a person who tries to rationalize everything, tries to come to some unknowable answers to why things like this occur, and at the same time trying to hold that which I consider humanity, the fact that we are given souls and we're given a purpose in this life. This is where the unfortunate theory came to my mind, and I don't necessarily. It did come from my mind, so in a way, it is a truth that I've come up with, but at the same time, I don't agree with it, particularly when I think about it for longer than, say, a couple seconds or a minute tops. But my question, having beaten around the bush for 8 hours at this point, is, do you ever wonder if certain people are what I shall recall as a side character? I'm not going to suggest so much that the child does not have his soul, but I could imagine a situation where a person is born that has a specific goal, a specific purpose in this life, and that purpose is to teach us the importance of time and teach us the importance of our lives, and that though some of us may live into their hundreds and others will die when they turn 70 or 60 or have an accident or make a mistake or something, or just be at the wrong place at the wrong time and have their life cut short, either before adulthood, shortly after adulthood, or most terrible in my mind as a child. Because as a child, you were not given the opportunity to have what I guess I can consider a life. You know, you essentially existed as nothing more than a person that we're all destined to die, but inevitably, I don't feel that you had a fair shake at life in comparison to even myself. You know, I don't consider myself an old person by any stretch, but at the same time, I recognize that living to 40 in some way, shape, or form is a bit of a blessing. And if I live to 50 or 60 or 70 or 100, those are all blessings in a way. And so, one of the ways that I try to rationalize in my brain, or one of the ways that I have rationalized this in my brain, is I question, and I understand how dangerous this is. Are some people born, you know, has God sent certain angels in the place of humans that they might come down and teach us a lesson without it necessarily being what we I guess you could call a human soul. And I understand this concept is hard for me to explain through my mind, but what I'm trying to rationalize in my brain is for someone to come down, for a soul to come down, to be born, and to lose and to go back to God as quickly as they do, knowing that if you don't believe in a reincarnation and you only get one trip through this world, that God would call you back to Him so quickly. If for no other reason than perhaps to teach us humans, both directly parents, indirectly bystanders, how valuable our days are, how valuable our life is. Because if you didn't have those examples where things didn't quite line up correctly, and having taken a human physiology course, one of the things that my human physiology teacher had sort of talked a lot about is this concept of the way the human body is aligned is to basically avoid all of the possible things that can kill you. And there are so many things that if the body didn't work in such a way, basically you would not survive for very long, if at all. Oh, we did a very good job of that. I don't think I lost anybody, and if I did, I only lost a couple, maybe one or two Pikmin there. That was very good. And I understand what I'm saying is very dangerous, because if you were a person and you were to listen to what I just said, and you think to yourself, I have a soul, I am who I am, you know, I exist, I have a brain, I've had my experiences that are different than your experiences, Mr. Voice behind the recording, and you to me are nothing more than a non-playable side character in my life. You're nothing. You're a nobody. But to me and to my family, I am somebody. And I have a soul, and I'm one of those people. You know, I'm a person, period, end of sentence. And I very much consider my life to be important, at least maybe not to you who are listening to me, but to my family and my friends and my workers. And of course, everyone is, like I said before, the hero of their own story. So that, of course, means that I think my life is pretty important. A side note before I continue my more serious discussion. We need 10 Pikmin to pick up the icon that's up there. So what we're basically going to do is throw these water Pikmin that are not good against fire to fight these fire things. And then as soon as they get lit on fire, I'm going to recall them like this. And I'm hoping not to lose any Pikmin. If I do this correctly, I should be able to defeat all of the fires. I was kind of hoping them just going into the water would be enough for them to lose, you know, get the fire put out, but that is apparently not the way that works. So we're just going to start timing this and throwing the Pikmin on top of it. And that's the plan. We're just going to keep doing this until I defeat all the fire things. And then we'll pick up the item at the top here. But getting back to the philosophy that I've been espounding for the past 10 minutes or so. On the one hand, I very much understand we all are human, we all have souls, we're all embodied with a sense of purpose, a sense of duty, a sense of destiny. But it's my way of rationalizing such an evil that a child should die at the age of 1 or 2 or 6 when they've not had any experiences. They have very limited experiences as a child that they can even remember. And they're missing out on, they're gonna miss out on a whole bunch of other things. Like, you know. So, they're missing out on a whole bunch of other things. Like, I'm sorry, I got a message from one of my coworkers on my phone, which I am not trying to laugh at the situation, obviously. It just, I recommended a television show for him to watch, and he's texting me back right now saying that he can't believe how good the show is. I'm like, Oz, his name's Oz. We all have different tastes and different opinions in shows. I don't expect everything that I like to line up with everything that you like. In the same regard, hopefully these guys don't get lit on fire. In the same regard, when I find something I think you'll like, I generally try to take whoever I know personally, viewpoint into consideration. I don't, like, if I don't think you're a slice of life anime person, I'm not going to recommend an anime slice of life. If you don't like romance shows, I'm not gonna suggest a romance or a high school drama show for you. I'm generally gonna try to suggest something I think you'll like. And if you don't like it, that's fine. We all have different opinions. We all have different standpoints on things. I'm not gonna say that I know everything. I certainly do not. But sort of trying to get back to what I'm saying. I used to this whole conversation is I'm using my brain to rationalize what I consider unjust or evil. And at the same time, when you think about animals, which we human beings don't like to think of ourselves as animals, there's nothing truly fair about being in nature. Inevitably what happens is, you know, the strongest get to live, the weak die, the ones that are born, you know, messed up are probably not going to survive. And that's just sort of the way things go in the natural world. You know, your mom and your dad, your male and the female, they procreate, and not all the genes quite line up like they're supposed to. And I talked about, you know, my human physiology teacher in high school talked about that. It's amazing how much has to go right for you to survive as a human being, from not just from the time you're conceived to the time you're born, or the 6 months or the year or the 5 years after you're born. But simply put, for you to live your day-to-day life, all of this stuff has to happen. Because if each portion of your body doesn't do exactly what it's supposed to, it'll lead to an eventual chain of breakdowns that'll basically end your life. And it goes from the very basic levels of digestion and automatic respiratory and your blood pumping without you even thinking about it, down to the cellular level of you're breathing oxygen in and the cells are grabbing the oxygen and turning it into carbon dioxide and giving you energy from all of the different things that you're putting into your body. And in a way, when you look at it as a natural thing, you know, the survival of the fittest level of viewing, I mean, inevitably you're going to produce children or animals or whatever you are, that aren't quite genetically sound. And we as human beings have the ability to sort of judge that and use, you know, both our logical brain and our innate brain, you know, our caveman brain, to figure out who is the most genetically compatible with us through a combination of both, do we get along, do we share similar values, and at the same time your brain is looking at that person, looking for the genes or the pheromones or whatever you want to call it that would produce the most viable offspring. And one can overwrite the other. You can certainly fall in love with someone that you are not super genetically compatible with. Hard to say. That portion's hard to say. That's conjecture. But you can definitely overwrite. And there's plenty of people that tend to avoid the important conversations. If I'm a staunch Republican, I'm probably not going to get along very well with a very staunch, you know, Democrat. I was going to go socialist, but that I don't think that plays quite as well, because I don't know too many people that would out now call themselves a socialist. Even a lot of people have socialist tendencies. I wouldn't say, I'm not going to say there isn't a socialist faction out in the United States, as there would be a nationalist faction or a communist faction or a anarchist faction. But to my point, I, in a way, find the fact that some children don't get a fair shake of life unfair, in a way to rationalize it as saying, well, maybe they are sent by God as angels into this world, and while they are not fully human, they are sent to us to teach us a lesson. And as I said before, that's a dangerous philosophy, because if you look at me and you say, well, you're just a non-playable character, you're a background character, you're soulless, you have no humanity in you, it is the lowest, most evil, subhuman way of thinking about others in this world. And I get that. But you hopefully understand where I'm coming from when I speak of this. Because on the one hand, what I very much say feels like a dystopian, not a dystopian future, obviously, but you could write a book that is a dystopian future where not every human is imbued with a soul, and then you throughout the book explore what concepts of, what constitutes a soul, and how ultimately maybe even those without souls are ultimately imbued with something which gives them a soul. Or ultimately the philosophy behind it basically is trying to keep you in a set class that basically tries to prevent you from, basically you're feeling as if you're less important to the overall scheme of society than you ultimately should. Because, again, everyone from the lowliest of workers to the most richest, arrogant pieces of shit that make millions of dollars off of the labor and the exploitation of technology and keeping wages as low as possible in order to make as much money for themselves and their company as possible, while using some of that to influence other people's thoughts and politics, is to be said. But, I don't know. I've ranted long enough, I guess, on this. I just kind of wanted to talk about this thought because in a way I had fleshed this out already in my brain in the way I thought about it. As I was lying asleep, trying to go to sleep one night. And I understood where I was coming from, and my mind seemed just. But ethically speaking, it is probably one of the most evil things I've ever thought of. So, anyways, sorry to bum you out if you didn't want to hear this hear this long monologue about my dream, about a thought I had randomly before I was going to bed, but hopefully the Pikmin entertained you while I was being depressing. Today's report. You gained some Pikmin, you lost some Pikmin, you picked up maybe a treasure or 5 or 10 or 50. Oh yeah, I did the run back, that's why. Alright, so that brings us to a little more than a quarter of the way there. The next episode, I'm sure we'll find another cave or 2. We should get to about 50% in the next episode or 2. And that will mean we'll be roughly halfway through the game, depending on if the values of these items start increasing or not. Some say you should look to the past, to places you've been already, in order to make new finds. Of course, extraordinary people like me are always pressing forward. I.e., you haven't explored the other areas, Chris. Why don't you go back and take a look at some of the areas you either have not explored yet, or go back to the old areas you have explored, but you haven't finished yet. Till next time, I hope you guys all have a good one.